stepbible.org is a great way to read the Bible and to study it as deep as you like. And you can use it to investigate the facts for difficult problems in the text. You've probably heard the theory that the church conspired to change Mark's Gospel. The idea is that Mark originally said nothing about the resurrection, so the church added the resurrection to the end and added the Son of God to the beginning of the Gospel. There is some basis to this theory because there are manuscript problems, but when you look at the facts, the theory becomes very weak indeed. The ending of Mark's Gospel certainly does look different from the rest, and most scholars agree that it isn't the original ending, though it is very old. You can see this in the footnote in the NIV and the ESV. The earliest manuscripts do not contain verses 9 to 20. It is likely that the last page of the original Mark fell off and got lost. The early church didn't copy Mark much, so this accident is believable. There just weren't enough manuscripts. But soon someone had to add an ending to tidy it up, because it ends too abruptly. In English, verse 8 ends with, "They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid." But in Greek it isn't so tidy. The Greek ends with gar, for, or because. Gar usually comes near the start of a phrase, like in English, for example, "for they were afraid that." Let's see the details. So add SBL Greek, and let's narrow the text to just Mark 16:8. And we want to see the Greek word order, so move the SBL to be the first version. And this gives us a nice interlinear text with the Greek as the master version for the order. And now in options, turn on grammar, and let's see the vocabulary options, and we'll tick all of those. And now we can see the Greek text at the top and the English of the ESV at the bottom, and in between we can see the English vocabulary, that's a one-word meaning for the Greek word, then the transliteration of the Greek word as pronounced in English, and the Greek version of that word. This is the standard dictionary form without the specific endings used in the text here, and the grammar of the actual form that's used in this text. The double square brackets mark the start of the new ending. So you can see the last word in the mark would have been gar, for. That would make very strange Greek, like it's rather strange in English. Gar almost never occurs at the end of a sentence and never at the end of a section or a book. You expect to see it at the middle or the start of a sentence. We can see this graphically by searching for it in the whole Greek Old Testament and New Testament. If you click on the Bible version and go to Ancient and pick the Apostolic Bible Greek. This is the ancient Greek translation of the Old Testament plus the New Testament in Greek. It's really useful for searching the whole Bible in Greek. Now search for gar. You have to click on More to find it. There are too many results, but we just want to see it graphically, so I'm going to reduce the size to a stupidly small font, just so that we can see the pattern. And now you can see it. Gar is in the middle of sentences or at the beginning, not at the end. Very occasionally Greeks did end a sentence with for as a kind of pregnant expectation, like we might say, "I can't do it because I'm afraid." And this puts the reader or the listener on the edge of their seat to know what's next. And it always does lead to something else. It can't be at the end of a book or a section. And in all Greek literature, there's no example of ending a document in this abrupt way. So it's almost certainly that Mark did not end here. There was something else that we've lost. Anyway, even if we have lost the ending about the resurrection, we see it elsewhere in Mark. Let's do that. Let's find all the references to the resurrection in Mark. So open ESV and NIV, and then do a text search for resurrection. And pick Mark as the place to search, then click on Find. Oh, only 2 verses, and neither of them talking about the resurrection of Jesus. We're only looking for the exact English form because we did a text search. We're looking just for resurrection. Let's look up the Greek word instead. Type resurrection again and pick, there, anastasis. Still the same result. Of course, the related Greek words. There it is, the verb, anistemi. And yes, there are 3 places where Jesus predicts his resurrection, in 8:31, 9:31, and 10:34. So anyone reading this gospel knows what's coming at the end. Even if the last page does fall off, we already know the final twist in this story. Jesus rises from the dead. That's the whole trajectory of the gospel. The real mystery in Mark is not how it will end, but who Jesus is. And this brings us back to the problem at the start of the gospel, because some early manuscripts miss out the words Son of God. This has led to the conspiracy that the church added Son of God later. They say Mark told the story of Jesus as a human teacher and healer. Then the church added a resurrection and called Jesus the Son of God. But let's look at the facts. So we want to go to the start of Mark. Let's start from scratch by clicking on Step. Then click on Genesis 1 and pick Mark and chapter 1. Then hover over the note at Son of God and you'll read that not all manuscripts have this. So there is a problem. Let's load some Greek texts to check this out. So click on the Bible and then on Ancient. The 3 New Testament editions at the top are representative of the 3 different groups of manuscripts. The majority text represents the text in most surviving manuscripts. This is virtually the same as the Orthodox text because most manuscripts were copied by the Greek-speaking church because every church needed one. The Western Church, of course, used Latin translations of the New Testament in their churches, so they didn't produce many Greek manuscripts. The TR text, that was created to represent what the King James translators used. That is, they used all the earliest manuscripts available to scholars in the 1600s. And the SBL Greek New Testament relies especially on the earliest Greek manuscripts that weren't available to those early scholars, but we have them now. That's the important papyri which were dug up in the sands of Egypt, and the codices dug out of libraries where they'd remained unused for centuries. By the way, I've picked the Tyndale House edition of SBL because that has morphology and vocabulary as well. So click on OK and find, and there they are. And seeing as we're interested in the Greek, let's look at the Greek order. So we move the ESV so the Greek version's at the top. And when we look at these, sure enough, Son of God is missing in the oldest manuscripts as represented by the SBL edition. But you're probably thinking, doesn't Mark use Son of God elsewhere? Let's look for it. To copy the Greek words, change the interleaved. Now copy the words and we can paste them into the line at the top to find a verse with them both. We want to put and between them so that it looks only for verses with both these words. And we'll replace Mark 1 with Mark so that we're searching the whole gospel. But we still only find this one verse. Why is that? Oh yes, we're looking for the exact words, and Greek has many endings. So we want to look for the vocabulary rather than the text. So let's just type Son, and we'll pick the Greek word, and then God, and pick that Greek word, and find the result. That's more like it. Now if you hover over Son, and it's very easy to find in all the verses. And in all these verses, there's no problem with the manuscripts. The earliest and the latest manuscripts are the same. They have Son of God. So the original text of Mark certainly did refer to Jesus as the Son of God. It wasn't an idea invented by the church and added later. But still, we have to ask, why is it missing in some manuscripts in Mark 1:1? Well, perhaps it was a scribal mistake. Or perhaps Mark really did not put it there. Perhaps he didn't want to put off a prospective convert reading for the first time. So, in chapters 3 and 5, the spirits exorcised from someone declare he's the Son of God. And in chapter 15, a centurion at the cross declares he's the Son of God. And, by the end of the Gospel, the readers are ready to conclude this for themselves. and that makes it really strong in their minds. So when we investigate the manuscript problems at the start and end of Mark, we find there are real difficulties, but there are also answers to those difficulties, because elsewhere in Mark it's clear that Jesus is expecting to rise from death. And elsewhere in Mark, everyone is already recognizing that Jesus is the Son of God. Mark clearly expects his readers to marvel at the resurrection and conclude for themselves that Jesus is the Son of God. Step Bible makes it so easy to get to the bottom of problems like this. We can see the facts and come to our own conclusions. Have fun.